There is just over a month left until the Russian State Duma elections. The Central Election Commission has finished registering candidate lists from 11 parties, and the official campaign period in the media begins on August 22nd. The ruling party, United Russia, is betting primarily on demonstrating absolute loyalty to Putin personally and supporting the war against Ukraine. It is very important for the Kremlin to show that everything is under control and that this election campaign is no different from the previous ones. But the mood in society suggests otherwise. What has changed, and what is the Kremlin dictator so afraid of? Let's figure it out. The unified voting day, as absurd as it may sound, will once again be stretched over 3 days. In 33 regions, voting will take place in an electronic format, and it is practically impossible to verify the accuracy of the results. Independent observers, of course, will not be allowed into the polling stations. Opposition parties and candidates were weeded out at the stage of nomination and document verification. And not even just the opposition, but anyone who deviates even slightly from the party line. Russian political strategists call this a cleanup on the distant approaches. So in Russia, no one is expecting any electoral surprises. Ordinary Russians are far more worried about something else. For example, how and on what the country will live after these elections.
For the first time, Russians will be voting in parliamentary elections during a war that feels very close, rather than looking like a distant special military operation. Gasoline keeps disappearing in the country due to Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries. Lines at gas stations stretch for many hours. Smoke from the burning warehouses of the largest online retailer is visible from space, and people are anxiously awaiting the collapse of online retail. Authorities are blocking mobile internet and cellular service for security reasons, depriving people of services that have long become routine for them. From a publication by the Moscow Times,
A new mobilization is becoming one of the main fears for many Russians. A month ago, the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine warned this autumn, Russia could mobilize more than 500,000 people to replenish losses and prepare for new offensive actions. This week, similar information was also published by the reputable publication The Wall Street Journal, citing its sources in Russia. According to journalists, the Kremlin has not abandoned plans for forced mobilization and may announce it immediately after the State Duma elections.
if Putin continues to pursue control over the entire territory of Donbass, he may have no other choice but to announce mobilization. And while the first wave of mobilization in Russia was aimed at calling up reservists and men with military experience, the new phase will involve recruiting people with minimal or no military experience at all. The political risks of such a decision could prove to be much greater than any potential military gain. For example, some Russians are already declaring their readiness to resist. From a publication by the Wall Street Journal.
In just one day, from the morning of August 4th to the morning of the 5th, the Russian occupation army suffered losses of 1,200 personnel killed and wounded. The general trend for the aggressor on the front remains unchanged. Huge losses with minimal advancement. July in general was quite telling in this regard. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, 42,860 Russian soldiers were put out of action. And this is a record figure for the 26th year. At the same time, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky announced a further increase in drone supplies for the Ukrainian Defense Forces, which means the enemy's losses will be even greater.
Today, there is already a report from the Ministry of Defense on the defeat of the Russians on the front line for July. The Alpha unit of the Security Service of Ukraine is #1 in terms of hits. They managed the most. Simply well done. And in total, during this July on the front line, 30,272 Russians were destroyed by all our units using only drones. These are those who were liquidated and severely wounded. And this is only what has clear video confirmation. That is, the trend on the front line remains unchanged. The Russians lose about 30,000 soldiers every month. At the same time, our army and all units of the defense and security forces of Ukraine will have even more drones.
Realizing the possible consequences of both a new mobilization and such large-scale losses on the front, Putin is trying to share the responsibility for the war with other government officials. This is stated in a report by the Institute for the Study of War. During a meeting with deputies, he emphasized that since 2021, the State Duma has passed about 3,000 laws, most of which were related to supporting the army, the military-industrial complex, and Russia's war against Ukraine as a whole. He also reminded them that it was the deputies who voted for the so-called accession of occupied Ukrainian territories into the Russian Federation. In the criminal world, this is called binding by blood. A similar logic is at work in the Kremlin. The dictator wants to make responsibility for the war collective so that no one would even think of laying it on him alone.
Putin noted that it was the Duma deputies who collectively passed the laws on the integration of the illegally occupied territories of the Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions into Russia. Putin likely emphasized the role of Duma deputies and ordinary citizens in Russia's war effort to deflect responsibility for the ongoing, costly war and to present them as fully supporting the Kremlin's decisions ahead of the Duma elections in September 2026. From a report by the Institute for the Study of War.
There is another important factor that is hitting the Kremlin's approval ratings hard. That is the economy. In Russia, it is entering a period of prolonged stagnation. GDP growth, according to the central bank's estimate, will not exceed 1%, and inflation will accelerate to at least 7%. Labor shortages, sanctions restrictions, and worn-out facilities continue to hinder production. At the same time, a fuel crisis is intensifying in the country. As calculated by Bloomberg, in July, Ukraine carried out at least 30 strikes on Russian oil infrastructure facilities, refineries, tankers, terminals, and pipelines. According to analysts, this has led to a drop in oil refining to its lowest level in the last 24 years.
In July, Ukraine intensified its attacks on Russian oil infrastructure, striking oil refineries, tankers, marine terminals, and pipelines one after another. The shift in targets makes it harder for Moscow to forecast risks and creates additional uncertainty regarding oil supplies. In the second half of the month, strikes increasingly targeted tankers and logistics routes. This gave some refineries time for repairs and to resume operations, but it created new risks for the export of finished products and crude oil. From a Bloomberg report,
it is not surprising that anxious sentiments are growing rapidly in Russian society. According to a poll by the Russian Public Opinion Foundation, 57% of Russians say that these sentiments are exactly what prevail among their friends and acquaintances. And this is the highest figure in nearly 4 years. Experts attribute this to the fact that the news agenda consists almost entirely of bad news. New sanctions, burning warehouses and oil refineries, lines at gas stations, rising prices for goods and services, and the threat of a new large-scale mobilization. Against this backdrop, the Kremlin's usual rhetoric about stability and unity sounds less and less convincing. And the upcoming elections aren't saving the situation at all. After all, the Kremlin might just be putting off the harshest and most unpopular decisions until after the voting is over.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.